So it looks like it's Throwback Thursday yet again, which also means another episode of Junk Drawer Flix. On this episode of Junk Drawer Flix, we do not need to go inside the junk drawer. We actually did a poll for this one, and we actually have a winner. Both films in that poll were actually released of June of 1985. One of those films was George Romero's Day of the Dead, and the second film was the sequel to Wizard of Oz called Return to Oz, starring Fairuza Balk and Piper Laurie. And I was actually very surprised on the results, because the clear winner was Return to Oz. So for me, Return to Oz was something I rented frequently from the local video store. It was always in a nice clamshell case. It was always nice to visit that movie from time to time, because I did enjoy the puppeteering and also the performances. And I always liked that the movie was dark. And it was a big plus for me too, because I'm not a big fan of musicals. And I did like the original film, however, I was not into the singing portion of it. And like most kids' movies from the 1980s, there's elements of horror sprinkled into the movie, just like the movie Legend, just like Labyrinth, just like Neverending Story. There was elements of horror sprinkled throughout this movie. A lot of dark characters and a lot of little scary moments in the movie. So that was something I always appreciated about this film and most kids' movies from the 1980s. Return to Oz was released on June 21st, 1985, starring Fairuza Balk and Piper Laurie. And like I said, moments of horror sprinkled in the movie. So we have Piper Laurie in this movie playing Auntie M. And you might remember Piper Laurie as the mother from Carrie. Just saying. The movie opens up 6 months after the events of the original film. Dorothy is back in Kansas. And remember, we did end the original film on a happy note. Remember that magical ending of the original film? Everybody was happy to see Dorothy. Dorothy was happy to be back. She loved her family, and they were all happy to be together, and it ended on a very happy note. Well, in this continuation of that story, everybody thinks Dorothy is nuts. And
remember how we spoke?
Not to talk about Oz.
Why?
Because it's just my imagination.
And guess what Auntie M and her uncle decide to do? They send Dorothy to the nut house for electroshock therapy to get those memories of Oz out of her head. And this is Dorothy now. Now that's the movie. Movie's over. Roll credits. Just kidding. Dorothy escapes the mental health facility with this little girl that no one else really seems to acknowledge except for Dorothy. And there's little clues that kind of make it seem like Dorothy maybe is experiencing some sort of mental breakdown, because she sees this other character, this other little girl, who's actually helping her out, saying, hey, you need to get out of here. However, no one else seems to really acknowledge the little girl. I never noticed that until I rewatched this movie recently. And it's kind of like, ooh, there's a lot of little things that are pointing to the fact that maybe Dorothy is a little out there. Maybe she's a little different. Maybe she is seeing things. There's a lot of things that suggest that, but as Dorothy and her possibly imaginary friend jump into a nearby river to escape from the mental health facility and also the kind of dark and scary workers that work there, we see Dorothy, but it looks like the little girl drowns, and Dorothy kind of just seems to forget about her imaginary friend. So that's also a little odd, I thought, when watching this movie again, is that, you know, her little friend just saved her life, and then now she possibly drowned, and Dorothy's kind of like, yeah, whatever. And Dorothy travels through that river and somehow makes it to Oz. And Oz is very different now. Oz almost looks like an apocalyptic city. It does not look like all shiny and bright like we had seen it in the original film. It's actually looking very run down, and it looks like it's been through hell. And it's actually kind of cool and kind of dark. You're kind of like, ooh, what happened to all these characters? What's going on? As Dorothy enters the apocalyptic city, which used to be Oz, she's now confronted by a new set of villains in this movie, which are called the Wheelers. So now we're introduced to a new set of villains. These villains could actually be potentially annoying, but also they're kind of creepy as well. They make some weird streaking, creaking sounds with their wheels. Reminiscent to the sounds that Dorothy heard in the mental facility. And one of them kind of looks like Freddy Krueger for a second, so it's kind of like, oh, that's what Freddy was doing before Nightmare on Elm Street.
I will take care of that.
now we're introduced to a new helpful character. His name is Instagram. Just kidding. His name is TikTok. He actually helps Dorothy out, and he kind of takes the place of the Tin Man because now we know that the Tin Man was actually frozen into stone. So TikTok defeats the Wheelers, and he and Dorothy and the chicken, they travel across Oz to go meet up with someone that could give them answers and some understanding to what happened to Oz, and also where's everybody else, where's the Scarecrow, because we also learned that the Scarecrow is now the King of Oz, and Dorothy's just trying to get some answers. We're now introduced to Mombi, who's actually living in one of the castles in Oz, and it's not really clear if she's a witch or she's some sort of sorceress or not. And this is where the horror factor kind of kicks in big time in this movie. She has interchangeable heads. She has a room full of heads, and she literally takes off one head and puts another one on. And it's kind of like, as a kid, like watching this film, I was like, ooh, that's pretty cool. But at the same time, I was always kind of like, ooh, that's a little scary, because each head looked like it had a different personality. Some looked more pretty than others, and then some looked like they were softer, and however, some looked like they were harsh as hell. So I just remember being like, ooh, this is kind of freaky.
What do you think?
Mombi explains to Dorothy, hey, I like your head. I'm going to lock you up in a room for a few years until you mature enough, and I'm going to take that head from you. So basically, Mombi locks up Dorothy and TikTok in another room, and basically just leaves her there to die or wait till she matures so she could take that head. And we're now introduced to other new characters that are actually hidden in that room as well. So Dorothy and her new friends try to plan an escape to get out of Mombi's dungeon, and basically they have to steal something from one of the rooms where all the heads are at, and get ready to be traumatized. That scene is shot very well. The tension buildup and then the way the music is cued is done very well, and with all the heads screaming. And I will say the special effects in this movie oftentimes are pretty good. They're actually a lot better than some of the effects I see now. So Dorothy and her new set of friends go on a quest to get some answers and to try to figure out what happened to Oz and where is everybody. And most of all, where is her friend the Scarecrow? This movie is a fantasy classic. It's got elements of horror. It's got some great puppeteering in this movie. It's got some great effects. It's got some great claymation effects. It's got some memorable characters in this film. This movie is definitely a must-watch. Most people probably have seen it that grew up in the 80s. And this film was written and directed by Walter Murch. This was one of the only other movies that he made. He's actually credited as a sound engineer and is still working till this day. I'm not sure why he's only done 2 films. He did a really good job with this film. This film is a classic, if you ask me. I would like to have seen more from him, so hopefully maybe one day we will get something from him. Return to Oz is currently streaming right now on Disney+, and it is worth the watch. Hopefully I didn't do too bad of a job today, so hopefully if you like what you see, don't forget to give me a thumbs up and hit subscribe. I'm Mike the Movie Misfit. I'll see you at the movies.
They're very powerful. They made it possible for me to conquer.
Get more out of life. Go out to a movie.